Nearly 10 years of endless searches, the world's #1 terrorist was finally brought down by the United States Armed Forces. The story of Osama Bin Laden's death has captured the nation's attention Sunday, May the 1st, and all over our country, including New York City and Washington, D.C. People were lining the streets, waving the American flag. Many consider this a moment of closure for those who lost loved ones on 9/11. But another question is raised: are we more or less safe? Here to speak now on this hot topic is attorney and political analyst and professor from SUNY Maritime, Mark Meirowitz, and joining us now. Mark, good to have you.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
Exciting.
Well, it's an exciting time for the United States.
Good week for America.
Good week. And we'll start off with Osama Bin Laden because questions are remaining right now. With the death of Osama Bin Laden, let's get right to it. Is America safer now, or should we be more concerned?
Well, it's really hard to know. I mean, it took us 10 years to find Osama Bin Laden. So the terror network is out there. We saw, for example, in Morocco that Al-Qaeda was able to pull off an extraordinarily terrible attack. And it's also clear that Osama Bin Laden, in his years in hiding, really broke up his network into self-sufficient cells. So it is possible that those are independent cells that can operate without central authority. I think that the information that was found in this treasure trove of data at the compound will be very important in answering that question, because there may be information there about possible terror attacks that are being planned. But it's really hard to know. I think that in terms of psychology, in terms of American power and security, this was a very, very good development for the United States. What it proved was that if America puts its mind to something, it can accomplish whatever it wants. And I wanted to mention President Obama's speech to the nation when this occurred. And I've read it now about 10 times. I think it's one of the best speeches, political speeches, I think, in American history. It really was a wonderful speech. It tied up everything. It talked about America, America's vision, and the need to protect America. But also, Obama very astutely pointed out that this attack on killing of Bin Laden was not an attack on Islam. He's a world leader. He proved that he is a great president, and I think he deserves commendation, not only for, I love his speech, but also for presidential leadership in doing what was a very, very gutsy endeavor.
I want to talk about the presidential leadership component for a minute, because much is being said right now about President Obama being the one that, quote unquote, pulled the trigger and made the gutsy decision to go after Osama Bin Laden and launch this operation. Since then, we know the president did extend an invitation to to former President George Bush to come to New York tomorrow, because they'll be here in New York City. President Bush opting not to.
And President Clinton,
and President Clinton, right, opting not to. Talk about the bipartisanship, because in the middle of all of this, we were in an area where we were divided politically. Does this do anything for the area of bipartisanship?
Well, it does temporarily. There's a short window of peace and quiet between the parties where we have a sense of American unity, a sense of the president is our unifier. The president did something for the whole country. He didn't do it for the Democrats. He didn't do it for the Republicans. He did it for the American people. He did it for the victims of 9/11. He did it for America's image in the world, and also because Bin Laden is a horrible terrorist who deserved what he got and more. So for the time being, there's a certain, let's say, a hiatus, a short window of peace and quiet, but I'm sure we're going to degenerate shortly. And unfortunately, I think you make a very interesting point, because maybe we should all step back for a minute and think about how we can work together to do more unifying things and not bicker about partisan issues. I think this might be a very good lesson. The point about Bush and Clinton not coming to, I think that maybe the motivation is this is Obama's moment, and even though President Bush began the war against terror, this is President Obama's opportunity to come to ground zero and to talk to the families. And maybe the other presidents felt they didn't want to detract or distract from that opportunity in that moment. You know, that might be the reason. I just don't know. But I think it's appropriate for President Obama to come. He's the president. He showed the leadership. He's coming to ground zero. He's our unifier. And he showed us his presidential ability in just terrific.
One final question about the whole Obama thing. Let me ask you this question here. You know, Donald Trump was going back and forth with President Obama during the week before this all occurred.
Yes.
the president actually literally being carded and having to show his actual birth certificate to defend his position. But yet and still, all the while, in the same time, dealing with the whole Obama administration and this whole Osama thing. Question rises up now, you know, when you look at Donald Trump and the smaller issue, and you see what the president is actually facing with, is it time for America to actually say, listen, let's focus on the larger issues rather than the smaller issues?
Well, I think this is a very interesting point. I mean, first of all, big picture is the incumbent president who takes an action like this, commander-in-chief, there is no comparison between a commander-in-chief and incumbent against a candidate, Trump or Romney or anybody else, number one. But number two, what is very surreal is the lead-up to the events of the killing of Osama Bin Laden. Because on Friday, you know, we had the royal wedding, which was a very, very wonderful, wonderful event, very charming, very uplifting. And over the weekend, the president appeared at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and a large part of his talk was about Donald Trump, really putting Trump down in a very, very solid way, and it was a hilarious presentation, brilliant presentation, and by the way, extraordinary in that right at that moment on that weekend, the president was planning the Osama bin Laden activity. I mean, that is just extraordinary. It shows poise in a time period that must have been hugely stressful for the president and his advisors. But part of his speech, a large part of his speech, had to do with Donald Trump, and he really comedically put him down. And then after that, Seth Meyers of Saturday Night Live did his routine, and a large part of that was about Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, and by the way, in the audience, Donald Trump looked very insulted and very upset, which I thought was a bad move on his part. He should have taken it as a joke. He wants to be a candidate. You have to take a little flack once in a while.
So I think that the thing that most Americans are talking about too is nobody knows who got voted off as Celebrity Apprentice because the President Trump.
Right, and that's very, very good. But I think the other point is that if Donald Trump wants to inquire on this now moot issue about the president's birth certificate, then is he going to release his financial returns and financial information to show how he does his business? I mean, that's a quid pro quo. So I don't think it's fair to have brought up that point. The point is now moot, and now President Obama is a leader, a president. He is widely admired by all political parties, and I think Donald Trump is kind of the incredible shrinking man. I don't know if you've seen that movie, or Honey, I Shrunk the Candidate. I think his candidacy is now, he's the mini-me of the Republican Party. I don't think he's really got a chance. And I really don't know in the field of Republican parties which of those candidates really has a chance, although right now, at this point, President Obama's stature, leadership are way up there, and he deserves it, honestly.
Aside from the Osama Bin Laden operation and killing Osama Bin Laden, we know that it was a great weekend for the world, actually having the opportunity to watch Kate and William get married.
Yes.
What's the takeaway out of all of this? Because would you look, the whole world was watching. We watched on Osama, but before that, just the 24 hours.
I have a take on it, actually, and I think that my impression about it was that in a world of mayhem and where we open the paper every day and there's some disaster, some horrible situation, whether it's a domestic family problem or an international problem, the news is horrible all the time, every day, on, and we expect that. We always expect some other horrible thing. And just for a short couple of hours, the world had a chance to see something a little bit uplifting, charming, you know, a love relationship between a man and a woman. It's really what it's about. And there was really no downside to it. And by the way, it's a great show. The Brits can put on one of the best shows in the world. And they put on a great, charming, entertaining, and I think very lovely show, which gave us a few minutes to reflect on the fact that the world is not totally disgusting, full of murder and mayhem, but also there are moments of decency and love and something nice and something pleasant. So my hat off to the Brits. Thank you very much, and congratulations to Kate and William, wherever they may be. I understand he's back at work and doing his thing, and they're going to go off somewhere to a honeymoon. And I think that
now's a good time to go.
Absolutely.
With all the talk that's going on, I think they can get away with a nice.
It's actually apparently going to the Seychelles, which is apparently, I think, a hotel that charges, I don't know, $10,000 a night, or what they can afford it. The British royal family has a few $1 million to go around.
And a few lovely wedding gifts. Update us here on the Morocco terrorist attack.
Well, the Morocco terrorist attack was particularly heinous because what happened was, and there was one particular story that was very heartbreaking. A family came to visit, a couple came with their child to visit the grandparents in Casablanca, and they stopped off at the hotel, and their room wasn't ready, so they left the child with the grandparents, and they said, you know, we'll go off to the cafe, we'll have a cup of coffee while we wait for the room to be available. And they went to this tourist cafe, which was then blown up by Al-Qaeda. And so these stories, these individual stories of destruction, show again that Al-Qaeda is worldwide. By the way, Morocco has been fairly quiet in the whole array of all of the things that are going on in the Middle East. I mean, you see a lot of upheaval in Egypt, Tunisia, of course, Libya, Bahrain, but Morocco has been pretty quiescent. So this was a very shocking event, and I think that it causes us to redouble our efforts to track down Al-Qaeda wherever they may be and put them out of business. And that would include now getting the #2 man and all of the networks around the world. This is not a simple thing to do. At the same time, the Middle East is in turmoil, and Iran is rising in its power. So the United States has a lot of challenges, and the Libyan situation is very, very complex. And on the Palestinian side, Hamas is also raising its ugly, ugly head. And by the way, Hamas issued a statement which basically criticized the United States for killing Bin Laden, who they called a martyr.
What does this do for international relations, particularly given the fact of Pakistan? Talking about the fact that knowing that Osama Bin Laden had this compound, very hard and inconceivable for Pakistani officials to say, listen, we didn't know that somebody Osama Bin Laden in name is actually staying here. First of all, do you buy the theory of the Palestinians? And second of all, the Palestinians, I should say. And second of all, where do you think this is going to actually put relations between the U.S. and Palestine? Because we do understand that the United States told Palestine after they got out of there and after they got out of Palestinian airspace.
Well, first of all, you know, the whole event is really very bizarre. I mean, basically, this area where Osama bin Laden was hiding is not only an area of beautiful houses, it's actually all military leaders. And the area is surrounded, and when you come in there, you've got to go past checkpoints because high-level military officials live there. And that would be like, and they call this one, the Pakistani West Point is located there. This is a military enclave. So the idea that the Pakistani military and ISI, which is their intelligence agency, did not know about this is very, very, it's just impossible to believe. They didn't have internet, they didn't have telephone service, they burned their own garbage, and anytime the kids in the neighborhood would throw a ball over the wall, the kids would come to their door and then they'd give them cash to go buy another ball. They wouldn't go and retrieve the ball. It was just weird and wacky and strange things going on there, and it's a huge, if you look at it, it's a huge compound. So it's impossible for the Army not to know about it. But the Army has had a long-standing relationship, and the intelligence services in Pakistan, with Osama bin Laden and with Al-Qaeda. They've had a relationship. The question is whether the political leaders knew about it. It is possible in a state like Pakistan, which is really a state that totters and teeters, it's kind of a failed state, that maybe the Prime Minister and the head of the government did not know what the Army knew. But clearly, the Army had to know about it. The question you're asking is a very vital question. Pakistan is a country that has nuclear weapons. If those nuclear weapons fell into the hands of the wrong people, you could have a world cataclysm. So I think as a practical matter, the United States has to work with Pakistan. That's why the President and the Secretary of State have not lashed out against them. But isn't it very, I think, bizarre that you're going into another country, but you don't tell them, and you make this this action. So I think that our relations with Pakistan are very uncertain. But on the other hand, we need to have a relationship with Pakistan, so we're going to have to modulate that relationship for the benefit of the United States and be very, very careful. But it's sort of like this. Don't tell them any secrets, because if you tell them this is the whole idea, then they're going to pass it on to your enemies.
Let me get this final question in before we wrap things up.
Sure.
Looking at the situation as we're getting more details by the day as to what occurred over in Pakistan.
Right.
Your initial reports talking about Osama bin Laden had a gun fired, a wife being used as a shield. Now we're understanding the fact that no, the wife wasn't used as a shield. Osama bin Laden may not have been armed. Does it hurt, harm, or injure the credibility of the United States given the fact of we're getting conflicting stories, particularly coming out of the White House?
Right, but I think that the report that was given, that was erroneous, was given by the counterterrorism advisor, and that might have been incorrect. After all, they're in Washington and they're getting data and information from a world away in an event that's not solid.
But Mark, they also said that they were getting their information real time. You see, that's
fair enough. I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, I believe it's water under the bridge. I think it's irrelevant to be candid about it. I mean, what's the point about drilling down on this thing? Osama bin Laden is dead. He's dead. He murdered thousands of people. He organized and was organizing murder around the world. There is no point in begrudging or discussing how his demise took place. He's dead, and that's that. The other issue was how he was buried. There's also some flack and buzz about should he have been buried at sea or not. You know what? At this point, he's dead. We have to move on. And the most important focus, as the president said in his wonderful speech, is we have to make sure to protect our security, because our security is not complete with the death of Osama, because we're going to have to go ahead and protect this country. And that's the priority, not to analyze, drill down, and deconstruct what happened, when, and how. The fact is, he's a mass murderer. He's dead. That's good for the world. Let's move on, and let's take out the rest of his colleagues at the same time.
Mark Meirowitz, that's why we bring you in. Thanks a lot.